It was a quiet morning in the fall of 1981 when the Taylor family's world fell apart. Three young siblings, triplets, just 6 years old, vanished from their backyard without a trace. One moment they were giggling under the tree swing, and the next they were simply gone. No witnesses, no clues, no answers. Their mother, Diane Taylor, spent decades haunted by that day, replaying every second, searching every lead, and refusing to give up hope. Most of the town had moved on, but for Diane, every birthday, every holiday was just another reminder of the silence left behind. For 30 long years, she kept their room untouched. She followed every cold case update, every mysterious letter in the mail, every anonymous phone called desperate for even the faintest sign that her children were still out there. People called her obsessed, broken, even delusional. But then, in the summer of 2011, something strange happened. A package arrived on her doorstep with no return address. Inside was an item that hadn't been seen since the day the triplets vanished. And a note that turned everything she thought she knew upside down. The handwriting was familiar. The message was short, but what it said, that was enough to open a door to a truth more shocking than anything she imagined. Where had they been? Why had they disappeared? And who was really behind it all? Stick around, because what Diane discovered next didn't just bring answers, changed her life forever. The note read only 5 words. Asterisk, we never forgot you, Mom. Diane's hands trembled as she reread it over and over, her heart racing. Tucked beneath it was a worn, sun-faded photo of the triplets, Jamie, Josh, and Julia, wearing the same clothes they had on the day they vanished. But what truly sent chills down her spine was the detail in the corner of the picture, a newspaper with a headline from just 2 weeks ago. That meant they were alive. Somewhere, the local authorities were skeptical, as they had been for years. Diane knew the case had long been cold in their eyes, just another old headline. But for her, this wasn't just a coincidence. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to get that message to her, and it meant one thing. The triplets hadn't just disappeared, they were taken. Or maybe they left. She started digging, retracing steps from decades ago. Who had access to their backyard that day? Who had suddenly moved away? Neighbors who were once tight-lipped now gave odd glances, and one even avoided her entirely. Diane noticed someone had started following her car, and her mail had clearly been opened before reaching her hands. It wasn't just a mystery anymore. Felt like a warning. Then she found it. An old storage box in her attic she hadn't touched in years. Inside were sketches, childlike notes, and something that didn't belong to her at all. Something that suggested her children may have planned their own disappearance. Diane stared at the crumpled papers and the box crayon drawings of a secret place. Stick figures in the woods, and odd symbols that didn't make much sense at first. But what caught her attention was a name scribbled over and over again. Mr. Halston. He had been their neighbor. Back in 1981, a quiet man, mid-40s then, who taught art at the local elementary school. She hadn't thought of him in years. He'd moved away shortly after the disappearance, claiming it was too painful to live near the tragedy. At the time, no one questioned it. Now it seemed too convenient. She searched for any trace of him online, but it was like he'd vanished too. No social media, no updated address, not even a death record. It was as if he'd erased himself. Diane drove out to the old house he used to own, now boarded up and sitting half-swallowed by weeds. Something told her it held answers. Meanwhile, a different trail began to unfold. Josh's old teacher, Mrs. Keller, had been diagnosed with dementia and placed in assisted care. When Diane visited her, she wasn't sure what to expect. But the moment she mentioned the triplets, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "They were so smart," she whispered. "Too smart. They talked about going somewhere. A better place." Now Diane was torn. Were they taken by someone they trusted? Or had they somehow chosen to vanish? And if they had, what could have driven 6-year-olds to leave their entire world behind? Diane sat in her car outside the old Halston house, heart pounding. The air felt heavier here, like time had settled, thick in the soil. She hadn't told anyone she was coming, not even her sister. The boarded windows seemed to watch her as she stepped onto the porch, the floorboards groaning under her weight. With a crowbar she'd brought just in case, she pried open a side door that led into what used to be Halston's art studio. Dust filled the air, but beneath it all, something caught her eye: an old corkboard, still clinging to the wall. It was covered in yellowed photographs, hand-drawn maps, and sketches of children. Her breath hitched. Right in the center were 3 faces she'd never forget: Josh and Julia. Different ages, different years. The drawings showed them older, growing. Someone had been watching them long after they vanished. But how and where? Behind a loose panel in the wall. Diane found a cassette tape labeled June 1983. Hands shaking, she slipped it into her old recorder. The voice that played was calm, deliberate, a man's voice. "They're not ready yet, but they're learning. They ask about her sometimes. I tell them she's not ready either." Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. Diane froze, holding her breath. Someone else was here. The front door creaked. Footsteps slow, measured, and far too familiar. She hadn't heard that rhythm in over 30 years, and now it was coming straight toward her. Diane ducked behind a broken easel, her heart thudding so loudly she was sure whoever was there could hear it. The footsteps moved closer, pausing just outside the studio door. She reached for her phone, but there was no signal. The door creaked open. A man stepped in, older, tall, his face partly hidden by a scarf and low cap. He didn't speak at first, just looked around the room slowly, like someone revisiting a memory. Then he said softly, "You finally came." Diane stood, unable to hold back. "Where are they?" she demanded. "Where are my children?" The man lifted his head, and for a second, she thought it was Mr. Halston, but it wasn't. It was someone else. Someone she hadn't seen since the week after they vanished: Halston's nephew, Michael. He had been a teen back then, quiet and always hanging around the triplets. No one ever thought he was anything more than a shy kid. "I tried to stop it," he said, voice cracking. "I swear I did." But he had plans. They weren't the only ones. Diane's knees weakened. "What do you mean, weren't the only ones?" Michael nodded toward a box in the corner. Diane opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of files, names, pictures, school reports, other missing children, all linked to the same neighborhood. Same school. Same year. She realized this wasn't just about her family. It was part of something much bigger. And somehow, it had never stopped. Diane stared at the files, her breath shallow. It was too much to take in, this network of missing children, all tied to the same quiet corner of town. Michael knelt beside her, eyes full of guilt. Halston believed in creating something different. He said these kids were special, gifted. He took them to raise them away from the world. He said he was protecting them. Her voice cracked. "And my children? They were the first," he whispered. They trusted him. They believed they were going to a better place. Diane's hands shook as she picked up one final file at the bottom of the box. Her heart stopped. It was labeled Phase 2. Inside were blueprints, recent dates, and a list of children currently enrolled at the same school her triplets once attended. It wasn't just history, someone was planning to do it again. Suddenly, a noise behind them made them spin around. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the fading sun, were 3 figures. Taller now. Grown, but their eyes those same eyes she used to kiss goodnight. "Jamie, Josh, Julia, Diane gasped, rushing forward, but they didn't move. Their faces were calm, unreadable. Jamie spoke first. We came to stop him too. But we've learned things, Mom. Things we can't forget. Josh stepped forward and held out a small device. We've been watching for years. This wasn't just his idea. Julia's voice was soft. He wasn't the only one funding it. Then Jamie said the words that chilled her to the bone. They used us to build something bigger. Diane could hardly breathe as she looked at her children, no longer the 6-year-olds frozen in memory, but grown, steady, and marked by years of secrecy. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped closer, and this time they didn't hold back. One by one, they embraced her. It wasn't the reunion she had imagined, but it was real, raw, heavy with truth. Jamie explained how Halston had taken them under the guise of protecting gifted minds, raising them in isolation, teaching them to think differently, to stay off the grid. Over time, they uncovered the truth. Halston was part of a larger, hidden operation, experimenting with intelligence and control. It had started with funding from a private tech group hidden under layers of fake nonprofits. Diane's children had become both subjects and tools. Josh revealed they'd been planning to escape for years, collecting evidence, building a digital map of every child taken, every name scrubbed from the system. They had returned now to stop the cycle, and they needed her to help expose it. The files, the audio recordings, and testimonies would be enough to start. Diane agreed, realizing her pain had a purpose. What began as a mother's endless search turned into something bigger, a movement for truth.